Ever wondered what it's like to work in a film studio? Spoiler, it's not all glamour and glitter. Sometimes it's just pancake and and lots of pancake. Welcome back, curious minds, to the Eloquent Explorers, where English comes with a dash of wit and a sprinkle of reality. Today, we step into Gemini Studios, Madras, a place that smelled of pancake makeup, echoed with the clatter of typewriters, and ran on equal parts chaos and charm. Through the eyes of Asokamitran, a writer, observer, and accidental witness to the film world, we'll meet poets who do not write poems, makeup artists who could drown you in pancake, and visitors who left more confusion than inspiration. This isn't your typical film fairy tale. It's poets and pancakes, a slice of studio life served with humor and irony. This one's a must know for Class 12 CBSE and PGT English preparation, full of irony, cultural insights, and exam ready quotes. It's a complete package. In this video, we are going to discuss about the author, the setting of the story. I will then give you a brief introduction, or you can say a kind of an overview for the story. We are going to then discuss the complete chapter paragraph wise and also understand the significance of this title as well as the significance of of this chapter in our syllabus. Then we are going to take a quick recap of the major events. Finally, we will be discussing the themes, tone, mood, style, literary devices, main characters, and the message that the chapter is providing us. This is our literary aspect of the story. Okay, so we are then finally going to discuss the literary aspect of this chapter. So make sure you stay till the end. This is again going to be a very long video, so it's up to you. You can watch it in parts or you can just watch the whole video at once, whatever floats your boat. So, well, let's get to know our author and let's start with the chapter. Our author Asokamitran was born in the year 1931 and he died in 2017. He was born in Sikandrabad and his real name is Jagdish. Yeah, actually it will be pronounced as Jagdish. A will be silent. Tyagarajan. Okay. He's a prominent Tamil writer and he's known for realistic fiction and memoir style essays. Okay. So, realistic fiction is a kind of fiction that involves or that also shows some real, you can say, that is inspired from the real events. Okay, fiction is something that is not real, so it's kind of an oxymoron, realistic fiction. So, it is that kind of genre. And memoir style essays, wherein he writes, he takes anecdotes, he uses the anecdotes from his life and his experiences to write essays. Okay. Then he worked at Gemini Studios for over a decade and before becoming a full-time writer, and this chapter is a part of such his experience at Gemini Studios. Okay, so the entire chapter is going to mention these studios and we are going to read some anecdotes. This is a non-fiction prose. Okay, this chapter is a non-fiction prose, so we are going to study um, a lot of anecdotes that are related to this Gemini Studios as to how things worked in here, people who visited, and the poets and pancakes. So we will be discussing all that. Now his writing is marked by simplicity, wit, and subtle irony, all of which we will see in this chapter. Then, poets and pancakes. This is a very important point that this chapter is an excerpt. Generally, in PGT exams, when you appear for exams such as that of KVS or AWES, they ask about a particular chapter and what is it a part of. Okay, if it's an excerpt or if it's a part of a longer poem, so it is very important to note such points. So this one is an excerpt from his autobiographical work which has been titled as My Years with Boss. Okay, where he shares behind the scene glimpses of the Indian film industry. So here we will see the behind the scene glimpses of our film industry, of our Tamil film industry actually, because this is all completely revolving around Gemini Studios. So it is very important to remember which studios he's talking about. It is Gemini Studios. Okay. And this is a very important point when it comes to the exams perspective. All right. So this is very important for your PGT exams, for KVS, for AWES, etc. These are the two exams actually that focus more on our 9 to 12th literature, mainly 11 to 12th literature. So, yeah. Okay. A key voice in post independence Indian literature in English and Tamil. He has been a key voice. All right. So, that was all about the author. And we will next discuss the setting of this story, which, of course, we all know it is Gemini Studios in Madras. So the setting, as just I told you, Gemini Studios, Madras, which is now Chennai, in the 1950s. So remember, the time is around 1950s, which is right after independence. So this is the post-independence era. Okay. So we can see some struggles and some you can say how we can get an insight as to how the society used to work at that time. So this is post-independence. All right. This was written in, this was set in post independence, 1950s. A buzzing film production studio known for its grandeur and political leanings. Okay. So, Gemini Studios was one of the biggest studios of, you can say, the uh, famous studios of those times. And we get to know how were produced at that time, films were produced at that time, how studios used to work, and this studio is known for its grandeur and its political leanings. Okay, like which side they were leaning towards and the political setting. Now, let me quickly give you an overview of this chapter so that you have a fair understanding of what this chapter consists and what to expect from this chapter. Now, this Poets and Pancakes by Asokamitran offers a witty and insightful glimpse into the life at Gemini Studios. This is one of the most famous film studios in India. It was one of the most famous film studios in India during 1940s and 50s. Blending humor with sharp observation, the chapter explores the quirks of the film industry, the people behind the scenes, and the intersection of cinema, literature, and politics. Through vivid anecdotes, the author takes us into a world where makeup rooms buzzed with creativity. So, we're going to read a lot about makeup and makeup products and how makeup was used at that time. Okay, that's the first half of the chapter, and the second half of this chapter revolves around poets. Okay, conversations sparked unexpected debates, and even global ideologies found their way into the studio corridors. Okay, there were some you can say globally renowned people that also visit and are also known or become a part of the discussion in these studios. It leaves readers wondering what happens when glamour, art, and ideology meet under the same roof. That is what we are going to discuss in this chapter, throughout the chapter. hope you all have your books wide open and pencils in your hands so that, or at least a notebook or some paper and pencil in your hands so that you can make notes of the important details that we discuss in this chapter. Okay, so we begin with the chapter now. Poets and Pancakes. Pancake was the brand name of this of a makeup material. Okay, Pancake was the brand name of makeup material that Gemini Studios bought in truckloads. So yes, a huge disappointment. This pancake is not the pancake that we were thinking of. It is actually a brand name and not the uh, this delicious, you can say, uh, thing that we eat. Okay. Now, Ashokamitran says that Greta Garbo must have used it, Miss Gohar must have used it, and Vijayanti Mala must have also used it, but Rati Agnihotri may not have even heard of it. Okay, so basically he's trying to tell us that before 1960s, okay, this is Garbo, this is our Miss Gohar, and this one is Vijayanti Mala. Okay, all these are very famous actors of their times. All right, so during their times when they were working, Pancake was used as the makeup for the makeup material. Okay, however, when it came to around 1960s and maybe a little later when Rati Agnihotri started working, so after around 1960s or let's say around 1970s, 70, 75 or around 80s, okay, this brand was not even used. You can say this brand kind of vanished. Okay, no, Rati Agnihotri mustn't have even heard of it. All right. Now, Ashokamitran tells us that the makeup department of the Gemini Studios was in the upstairs of a building that was believed to have been Robert Clive's stables. A dozen other buildings in the city are said to have been his residence. For his brief life and even briefer stay in Madras, Robert Clive seems to have done a lot of moving, besides fighting some impossible battles in remote corners of India and marrying a maiden in St. Mary's Church in Fort St. George in Madras. Okay, so this one is Robert Clive, and I want all grade 12 students to that are watching, you have to tell us which battle. You have to write in the comment which battle is he associated with. Okay, I can tell you, and also write down which year. Okay, so let me see how many of you took history seriously in your grade 9th and 10th and 8th when we discussed our British history. Okay, so I'm sure you all know it. I want you all to write down which battle he's accredited to, which battle did he win, year and place. Okay, the battle's name includes the place. Now, Robert Clive, little information has been given about him here, but we all know that Robert Clive was the first British governor over here, okay, in India, in Bengal, okay, and uh, around 1700s, mid 18th century, he came to India, and he's accredited with fighting some impossible battles, as is being told. So this is one of them. All right. Now we get to know that this uh, around, let's say, 200 years later, this Gemini studio is now located on a building. Okay, this is, let's say, this is believed to be Robert Clive's stables. All right, and on top of these stables there is a building that is our Gemini studio. Is this clear? Now then, as we discussed that there were a dozen buildings in the city that were his residence. So this Mr. Clive, he kept moving. He kept moving here and there, and he kept, you can say, switching places. So he has a lot of buildings to his name. And even though his life was short and his stay in Madras was even shorter, he did a lot of moving. Okay, other than fighting, he did a lot of moving, and he also married a maiden in St. Mary's Church in Fort St. George. So this is Fort St. George, in which we have St. Mary's Church, and which is located in Madras. So while he was in Madras, in his brief stay, he also married a young girl. So we begin with the introduction to Pancake, which is a makeup brand, and we get to know that it was a very old, you can say, brand, and a lot of people in beginning of 1900s and maybe even before that used it. But then as it came to around after mid 20th century, and maybe towards the end of the towards the end of the 20th century, this brand start vanished. So people like Rati Agnihotri and actors that have come after her do not even know this name, this brand even existed. And then we also get to know that where our Gemini Studios is situated, and a little introduction to Robert Clive. The makeup room had the look of a hair cutting salon with lights at all angles around half a dozen large mirrors. Okay. They were all incandescent lights, so you can imagine the fiery misery those subjected to makeup. The makeup department was first headed by a Bengali who became too big for a studio and left. He was succeeded by a Maharashtrian who was assisted by a Dharwar Kannadiga, an Andhra, a Madras Indian Christian, and Anglo Burmese, and the usual local Tamils. Okay, so we talk about the makeup room that was there in Gemini Studios, and it had a look of a hair cutting salon. It looked like a hair cutting salon, and there were lights at all angles, and then there were around half a dozen large mirrors. So they were so bright lights. Incandescent is uh, bright lights, and they were so bright that it would heat up the entire area. So one can imagine that anybody who sat in that chair, let's say this is our chair, okay, don't just ignore the drawing. All right, and these are mirrors. There are mirrors everywhere. Okay, and then there are lights. There is light coming from here, 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 everywhere. In all directions there is light. So the person sitting here, let's make the person a different color. Okay. Let's make it blue. All right. So the person sitting here was, the person had to bear all these lights, and there were so many lights, and they were so bright that they rose the temperature. It became very hot. Okay. Come on. This pen is not ready to, you know, just come. Okay. Finally. All right. Now we get to know that this makeup department was first headed by a Bengali who became too big, who became too you can say too big for the post, to uh, and just left. Okay, that person just left, a Bengali. Then he was succeeded. After the Bengali came a Maharashtrian. Then he was assisted by Dharwar Kannadiga, then an Andhra, a Madras Indian Christian, an Anglo Burmese, and the usual local Tamils. So, all this, there were a lot of different makeup artists. Okay, it is not that there was, you can say, uh, the group of makeup artists, the makeup artists actually that came in one after the other. One came, the other one left, and all these, they belonged from different areas. So it was not just concentrated to one area that only Tamils used to work. It showed national integration. It showed how people from different areas, different cities, different towns, different states were coming to work in these Gemini studios. So all this shows that there was a great deal of national integration. Long before AIR and Doordarshan began broadcasting programs on national integration. So, all these makeup artists, they tell us that there was already a national integration. People from all parts of India were coming. and working together, or maybe one after the other. Long before All India Radio or our Doordarshan channel, they started broadcasting programs on national integration, asking people to, come together. These makeup artists were already doing that. This gang of nationally integrated makeup men could turn any decent looking person into a hideous crimson hued monster with the help of truckloads of pancake and a number of other locally made potions and lotions. So now, this our Ashokamitran is actually using irony, no, sorry, using satire to comment on these works, on these makeup artists' works, and he's telling us that these makeup artists, these makeup men, they could turn any decent looking person, any person with a decent appearance, into a hideous, a very horrible looking crimson hued. Crimson is this red color, okay, crimson hued monster. So they could turn any normal, average looking person, any decent looking person, into someone who was horrible monster kind of person in looks. Okay, so that's how much he's actually just telling us that they put a lot of makeup in those times. A lot, too much of makeup was put on the actors, on the artists, because of course they got truckloads of pancake, and then they also used some other locally made potions and lotions. Okay, so here he is criticizing the makeup men, the makeup artists, uh, for using too much of makeup on decent looking people. Those were the days of mainly indoor shooting, and only 5% of the film was shot outdoors. I suppose the sets and studio lights needed the girls and boys to be made to look ugly in order to look presentable in the movie. A strict hierarchy was maintained in the makeup department. The chief makeup man made the chief actors and actresses ugly, his senior assistant, the second hero and heroine, the junior assistant, the main comedian, and so forth. The players who played the crowd were the responsibility of the office boy. Even the makeup department of Gemini Studio had an office boy. On the days when there was a crowd shooting, you could see him mixing his paint in a giant vessel and slapping it on the crowd players. The idea was to close every pore on the surface of the face in the process of applying makeup. He wasn't exactly a boy. He was in his early 40s, having entered the studios years ago in hope of becoming a star actor or a top screenwriter, director, or lyrics writer. He was a bit of a poet. Now, we get to know that during those times, in around after 1900s, so let's say around 20th century, okay, the main shooting was all done indoors, and only 5% of the film was shot outdoors. So it was majorly shooting on sets. Okay, so those sets, according to Ashokamitran, says that Ashokamitran tells us that probably those sets and those studio lights, these needed the girls and the boys, the actors, to look ugly, to be, to be made up with using a lot of makeup material, and so that they could look presentable in the movies. Now, even in this makeup department, there was a strict hierarchy, there was a strict system or organization that was the levels of organization that was maintained by this makeup department. So the chief makeup man would only uh, use makeup and only work with the actors and the actresses, the chief, the lead roles, okay, the main hero and the heroine. After that, his senior assistant would work with the hero, the second hero and heroine. Okay, so let's say if we take an example of a movie, and let's say Amitabh Bachchan and I don't let's say Jaya Bachchan, okay, they are the main let's say they are the lead actor and actress, okay. So our chief makeup man would only work with these two and would put makeup on these two. And then let's say we have side actors. Let's say the second heroine are, let's say, Devanan. Okay. And on the top of my head, I can't actually remember. I'm not from that era, so I don't know many names. But let's say some other actress I can't really think of. Let's say someone beginning with A. Okay, so then the senior assistant would put makeup on these two. These were the second. So it's just like this. Hierarchy would go on. Okay, and then after that the junior assistant would put makeup on the comedian, and then after that you had so on and so forth. And then finally there was this office boy. Okay, this office boy, this is not visible, so let's say office boy, he would put makeup on the crowd. So if there were scenes of crowds where you had to show a lot of people, you could see this office boy using huge vessels, using a big container, and he would put in a lot of paint in that, a lot of makeup paint in that. And that this office boy, this he would use this paint on crowd players, and he would just put the makeup without even thinking. He would just put lot of makeup, layers and layers of makeup on these crowd players also. So you get to see that there was hierarchy here. And then you could also see behind the scenes of how makeup was done at that time. Okay, that everyone would just put a lot of makeup, and they were made ugly. They were they had to put on a lot of makeup, and so that Asokamitran says that they would look presentable in front of the camera. Now he also says that this uh, office boy was not actually a boy. If you just say office boy, you think of a boy, a lad of maybe 18 to 20, 25, early 30s. All right, but this boy was actually a man. Okay, he would be in his early 40s, who would have entered with dreams and hopes of becoming a successful actor, or maybe a lyricist, or maybe a top screenwriter or director, but uh, would have failed and then finally resorted to becoming an office boy. Okay, so this, and there's this characteristic of this office boy, that this person was a bit of a poet. In those days, I worked in a cubicle. I hope you're all clear with who is I. I is Asokamitran. Okay, all right. So this I person is Asokamitran. In those days, he's saying that he used to work in a cubicle, two whole sides of which were French windows. I didn't know at that time they were called French windows. Seeing me sitting at my desk, tearing up newspapers day in and day out, most people thought I was doing next to nothing. This happens at least once in every video. I don't know why. Something wrong. My pen hates me. Anyhow, okay. So, seeing me sitting at my desk tearing up newspapers day in and day out, most people thought I was doing next to nothing. It is likely that the boss thought likewise too. So, there is one person mentioned as the boss, probably the highest person there. Okay, so goes by the name the boss everywhere. So, anyone who felt I should be given some occupation would barge into my cubicle and deliver an extended lecture. The boy in the makeup department had decided I should be enlightened on how great literary talent was being allowed to go waste in a department fit only for barbers and perverts. Soon, I was praying for crowd shooting all the time. Nothing short of it could save me from his epics. Now, in those days, Asokamitran, he's a writer. Okay, so he used to work in a cubicle. Okay, he would work, whatever, maybe uh, in his cubicle. And cubicle is something like this, an office that is enclosed on three sides, and then there is one or maybe two sides, and then there is one side clear, or two sides are clear. And he tells us that there were huge French windows where he used to work on two sides. All right. So let's say this is one, and if I can draw on this side, so maybe, maybe not. So just imagine there is a window here, because yes, this is exactly what I did not want to do. Okay. All right. So he would sit at his desk, and he would go through newspapers day in and day out. He would read, and he would tear up newspapers. And so a lot of people, they thought, most of the people working there, they thought that he did nothing. Okay, next to nothing. And even the boss over there, he says that he thought likewise. He thought the same, that this person does nothing. So what would happen is that anybody would come to his cubicle, and they would give um, an extended lecture. Okay, they would tell him, they would keep lecturing him that he must do something, he should work, or he should do something. Okay, and the boy in the makeup department, the office boy that we talked about in the last paragraph, he finally decided that Ashokamitran should be enlightened. He should be told that how such a great literary talent, how the talent of Ashokamitran was being allowed to go to waste in a department fit only for barbers and perverts. Okay, now he would talk a lot about, and he would kind of irritate Ashokamitran, discussing his thoughts on how literary talent was being wasted. Okay, now because he was so frustrated with his lectures, he would pray that there should be crowd shootings all the time, because only that would save him from all his lectures and all his epics. All right. In all instances of frustration, you will find the anger directed towards a single person openly or covertly. This man of the makeup department was convinced that all his woes, ignominy, and neglect were due to Kothamangalam Subbu. Okay. Subbu was the number two at Gemini Studios. He couldn't have had more encouraging opening in films than our grown up makeup boy had. On the contrary, he must have had to face more uncertain and difficult times, for when he began his career, there were no firmly established film producing companies or studios. Even in the matter of education, especially formal education, Subbu couldn't have had an appreciable lead over our boy. But by virtue of being born a Brahmin, a virtue indeed, he must have had exposure to more affluent situations and people. Okay, so now what happened? He's giving us another anecdote that whenever there was an instance of frustration, okay, then there would be everybody would direct their anger towards one single person, either openly or in secret, okay, in a hidden way. And this man of the makeup department was convinced. So there was this man in the makeup department, and whenever anybody got angry or frustrated, they would just direct their anger towards this person, maybe openly, maybe they would scold this person, or maybe indirectly by creating troubles in his work. So this person was convinced that all his woes, all his worries, all his troubles, all his sadness, all his public shame and embarrassment and the neglect were due to one person. Okay, so other people blamed this person, and this person blamed one person and one person only, which was Kothamangalam Subbu. So the full name of Subbu is Kothamangalam Subbu. So this can be one another important point as the uh, exams perspective. Okay, Subbu was number two at Gemini Studios. Okay, so after the boss, Subbu was the next person in the hierarchy of Gemini Studios. he couldn't have had a more encouraging opening in films than our grown up makeup boy had. So you can say that Ashoka Mitran tells us that even Subbu must have not got enough chances, or must have not been given enough roles, or had enough opportunities to show his talent. In fact, nothing more than what these makeup boys would get. Okay, so he's just telling us that he wouldn't have got any opportunity, and even in fact, it would have been the opposite. He would have faced more uncertain and difficult times, because when he started his career, there was no firmly established film producing company or studio. So, like uh, during Ashoka Mitran's time, they had Gemini Studios. During Subbu's time, when he started his career, there was nothing, no established. So, you can understand that this Subbu person is quite old. Okay. And even in the matter of education, um, he wouldn't have got in a proper education. Okay, so you can say that he's comparing Subbu to our makeup boy, and he says that he wouldn't have got enough opportunities, and he wouldn't have got a proper stage to show his talent, not even, and he wouldn't have even got a proper education. But because he was born a Brahmin, because Subbu was born as a in the Brahmin, um, if according to the caste system, he was born into the Brahmin caste, into the Brahmin community, which was a virtue indeed. He must have, of course, had exposure to more better situations and people. So he was, you can say he was. If we talk about caste systems hierarchy, if we talk about that structure, he was born into one of the top classes in one of the top castes, and that is what gave him an opportunity. Okay, a better opportunity as compared to people like the makeup boys. Okay. He had the ability to look cheerful at all times, even after having had a hand in a flop film. He always had work for somebody. He could never do things on his own, but his sense of loyalty made him identify himself with this principle completely, and turn his entire creativity to his principle's advantage. He was tailor made for films. Here was a man who could be inspired when commanded. The rat fights the tigress under water and kills her, but takes pity on the cubs and tends them lovingly. I don't know how to do this scene, the producer would say, and Subbu would come out with 4 ways of the rat pouring affection on its victim's offspring. Good, but I'm not sure it's effective enough, the producer would say, and in a minute, Subbu would come out with 14 more alternatives. Filmmaking must have been and was so easy with a man like Subbu around. And if ever there was a man who gave direction and definition to Gemini Studios during its golden years, it was Subbu. Okay, uh, right. It was Subbu. Okay, so now Ashoka Mitran tells us about the importance of Subbu. Okay, Subbu was a Brahmin. Okay, but he was a cheerful person. He was a kind person. He was a cheerful person. All right. Now, but he couldn't do anything on his own. Okay, so he always asked other people to do things for him. Okay, but his sense of loyalty made him identify himself with this principle completely, and turn his entire creativity to his principles advantage. So he was very loyal, okay, to boss, to actually to his principle, and he would turn his creativity. So we can see how creative he was. Okay, so what would happen is that if the producer asked Subbu that he would describe a scene, he would say, let's, for example, that there is a rat and the rat has fought the tigress, which is a very impossible situation. Okay, so the rat has fought the tigress and killed her. Okay, but the rat takes pity on the tigress's cubs. Okay, so there is a rat who kills this tigress, but this rat takes pity on the cubs. Okay, so now he wants he now the producer says to Subu that he needs to tell him about how to present this scene, okay, and how to show that the rat is pouring affection, okay, how to show affection. Now Subu, being so creative, would immediately come out with four scenarios in which this rat's emotions could be shown. And then, if the producer said that this is not enough for him and he did not like any of these suggestions, Subu would in a minute come up with 14. So, this is actually giving us an example of his creativity. Okay, how creative he was. And then Asokamitran credits the golden years of Gemini Studios and the ease of working of its producers uh, to Subu. So, he's talking about the importance of Subu, telling us that he is a natural in filmmaking. Okay. Subu had a separate identity as a poet, and though he was certainly capable of more complex and higher forms, he deliberately chose to address his poetry to the masses. His success in films overshadowed and dwarfed his literary achievements, or so his critics felt. He composed several truly original story poems in folk refrain and diction, and also wrote a sprawling novel, Thilanna Mohanambal. Okay, again, another important point. Thilanna Mohanambal. With dozens of very deftly etched characters, he quite successfully recreated the mood and manner of Devdasis of the early 20th century. He was an amazing actor. He never aspired to the lead roles, but whatever subsidiary roles he played in any of the films, he performed better than the supposed main players. He had a genuine love for anyone he came across, and his house was a permanent residence for dozens of near and far relations and acquaintances. It seemed against Subu's nature to be even conscious that he was feeding and supporting so many of them. Such a charitable and improvident man, and yet he had enemies. Was it because he seemed so close and intimate with the boss? Or was it his general demeanor that resembled a sycophant's? Or his readiness to say nice things about everything? In any case, there was this man in the makeup department who would wish the direst things for Subu. Okay, so now we get to know more about Subu, that he had a separate identity as a poet. Okay, so he chose to recite his poems to the masses. Okay, he would instead of using television or using films to, or maybe giving his poems as songs, lyrics to songs, he actually recited his poems in front of the or in front of the crowd. And even though he had this access, he could have used more complex, more higher forms to present his poetry, but he did not. Okay, however, his critics felt that his success in the films, they covered the talent of of him as a poet. All right, so they dwarfed his literary achievements. Now he composed several truly original story poems. Okay, in folk refrain. So folk refrain is a repeated phrase, verse, or section in folk song, typically appearing at the end of each stanza or verse. Alright, so he used this kind of literary device to create his story poems, and then and diction, and also wrote a sprawling novel. So this novel, Thilanna Mohanambal, it was a very you can say widespread, a very renowned novel that he wrote with with a lot of with dozens of deftly, very skillfully written down, created art characters. Okay, so there were a lot of lot of characters in this novel, and it was a novel of great scope. It was a novel that was loved by a lot of people. Okay, He was also successful in recreating the mood and manner of the Devdasis. The Devdasi was actually a kind of, you can say, ritual during very old times, where the women, they would give up everything, and they would start serving the temples, the priests in the temples, and they would perform their dances over there. Okay. So there is a dance form that has come out from Devdasis. I would like you people to tell us. It is one of the very famous dance forms that has come from this custom of Devdasis. And I want you to write down in the comments which dance form that is. And if you get the correct answer, I'm going to give you a heart. All right. So let's see if you know which Indian classical dance form has originated from this custom of Devdasis. All right. So now Ashokamitran also tells us that Subbu was an amazing actor, but he never went for the lead roles. But whatever you gave this man, whatever role he played, he performed it better, much better than the lead actors and actresses. All right. Now he had genuine love for anyone who came across. So he was very welcoming. He was a very warm person, and he would open his house to any person who came to him. So uh, in his house had actually become a permanent residence for dozens of near and far relations and acquaintances. So anybody who came to Madras, maybe for work at the Gemini Studios, or maybe anywhere else, they would come and stay at this Subbu's apartment, Subbu's house, and most of them wouldn't leave. Okay, so he was hosting dozens of relations, okay, dozens of people that were his close relations, his far relations, or even acquaintances. Okay, and he had no problem with that and did not mind. He wasn't even conscious that he was feeding and supporting so many of them. He just did it out of his good nature and good heart. Now, such a charitable and improvident man, and yet he had enemies. Okay, so now Ashokamitran is also a little shocked that such a man with such a demeanor, with such a character, who would welcome anybody and everybody to his house, and who would be so polite and so warm with everyone, that how could this person have enemies? But he did. Remember, we talked about this one person who would blame Subbu for all his worries and all his problems. Okay, so there was this man in the makeup department who would wish very terrible things for Subbu. But why was it? So Ashokamitran is trying to guess that was it because Subbu was the closest to the boss? Was that the reason? Was it jealousy? Or was it that his general demeanor, his general characteristic was somewhat similar to a sycophant, a person who, kind of, you can say, a person who uh, acts very friendly and very politely just to get some advantage of some other person. Okay, chaplus you can call in Hindi. All right. Or or was it his readiness that he was always ready to say something nice about everything? So were these his characteristics? Were those the reasons why this man in this makeup department would wish the worst things for Subbu? Why he hated Subbu? Okay, I hope this much is clear. This chapter is actually a kind of, you can say, a combination of a lot of different anecdotes, lot of different incidents and situations that have happened in Ashokamitran's life while he was working at the Gemini Studios. So it is a collection, kind of. So sometimes it may feel that it is not even connected. All right. So this is actually a non-fiction prose. As I told you, it's an essay, and it's an excerpt from his autobiography. You saw Subbu always with the boss, but in the attendance rolls, he was grouped under a department called the Story Department, comprising a lawyer and an assembly of writers and poets. The lawyer was also officially known as the legal advisor, but everybody referred to him as the opposite. So, what would the opposite of legal advisor be? Let's see how many of you could get this criticism of his. An extremely talented actress who was also extremely temperamental once flew over the sets. While everyone stood stunned, the lawyer quietly switched on the recording equipment. When the actress paused for breath, the lawyer said to her, "1 minute, please," and played back the recording. There was nothing incriminating or unmentionably foul about the actress's tirade against the producer. But when she heard her voice again through the sound equipment, she was struck dumb. A girl from the countryside, she hadn't gone through all the stages of worldly experience that generally precede a position of importance and sophistication that she had found herself catapulted into. She never quite recovered from the terror she felt that day. That was the end of a brief and brilliant acting career. The legal advisor, who was also a member of the story department, had unwittingly brought about that sad end. Okay, now this Subu, we always Ashokamitran tells us that Subu was always seen with the boss, but whenever there were attendance rolls, whenever uh, there were the people were called in attendance, maybe in a meeting or just to check who all have arrived and who haven't, he was always grouped under the department called story department. Now this story department comprised a lawyer, an assembly of writers, and poets. Okay, so what do you think Ashoka Mitran's department would be then? Think about it. The lawyer was officially known as the legal advisor, okay, but everybody, they referred to him as the opposite, okay. An extremely talented actress who was also extremely temperamental once blew over the sets. So what happened? Now he's telling us about another incident and another anecdote from his experience. That once what happened was that there was this very talented actress, and she was also very temperamental. She would get angry very easily. Okay, so she started shouting on the sets, on people. Okay, and now, while everybody was stunned, everybody was shocked as to what to do, the lawyer, this witty lawyer, he quietly switched on the recording equipment. So he actually recorded her entire fit of rage and whatever she said and did in this fit of anger. And then, when she paused for a breath, this lawyer, he told her to hold on for a minute, and he played that recording. Now, there was nothing incriminating or unmentionably foul about the anger. Okay, so there was nothing like, it was not anything, you can say, disrespectful, or it was not anything like that what made this actress feel guilty, okay, or appear like that the actress has done something wrong. It was nothing wrong. She was just angry, and she was uh, you know uh, taking that anger out. She was really angry against this producer. But when she heard herself, she was shocked that she had been recorded. And this girl, she was a simple girl from countryside, from the village, and she hadn't really gone through all these stages of experience that come before, when you gain importance, and when you get to that sophistication, the level of sophistication that she was expected to show, the level of maturity that she was expected to show, she hadn't really got any experience in that area. So you can say that she was pushed into, okay, she was actually pushed into a place of very, she was like those people who rise to fame very quickly. Okay, so they don't know how to handle it. So she belonged to a village, and she hadn't really had enough experience to understand how to handle herself, to how to carry herself maturely. And that was it. And that was the reason why she had shouted on this producer. And it was nothing wrong, there was nothing foul about it, there was nothing bad about it. However, this act of that lawyer, of recording her um, a fit of anger, her outburst, and then showing it to her again, that made her feel something terrible. Okay, she couldn't ever recover from that terror, from that fear that she felt that day. And that was the end of her career. She couldn't recover from it, and she could never come back in the films. That was it. So one very brilliant actress's career was ended by this legal advisor, who was also member of the story department. While every other member of the department wore a kind of uniform khadi dhoti with slightly oversized and clumsily tailored white khadi shirt, the legal advisor wore pants and a tie, and sometimes a coat that looked like a coat of mail. Often he looked alone and helpless, a man of cold logic in a crowd of dreamers, a neutral man in an assembly of Gandhiites and Khadiites. Like so many of those who were close to the boss, he was allowed to produce a film, and though a lot of raw stock and pancake were used on it, not much came of the film. Then one day, the boss closed down the story department, and this was perhaps the only instance in all human history where a lawyer lost his job because the poets were asked to go home. Okay. Now, another anecdote from um, his experience, that while every other member of the department, now he's telling us a little more about our legal advisor. Okay. Legal advisor, or you can say our lawyer. Now, in the entire department, the story department, everybody wore khadi dhoti with a slightly oversized and clumsily tailored, not even stitched to proper fitting. Okay, so they wore such khadi shirt and khadi dhoti, and only this legal advisor was the one who would wear pants, who would wear a tie, and sometimes he would wear a coat, like like a coat of mail. Okay, often he looked alone and helpless because there was only one legal advisor. So he often felt alone, he often felt helpless. That was also because he was a man of cold logic in a crowd of dreamers. So he was a part of a department that had poets, okay, that had writers, story writers. Now, he was a lawyer, so he had to be logical. Whereas the main characteristic of poets and writers is that they dream, they imagine. Okay, so they live in a whole other fantasy world. All right, fantasy world. But this lawyer can't do so. Okay, this lawyer has to work on logic. That's what his work demands. Okay, so he was a kind of a neutral man in an assembly of Gandhiites and Khadiites. Okay, like now, so he kind of felt alone. He was very neutral. He had no opinion about Gandhi and Khadi and so on and so forth. But so he felt kind of alone and helpless. And now we also get to know that he was close to the boss. Okay, so like other people who were close to the boss, they were allowed to produce films. They were allowed to finance the films, and they were allowed to produce the films, even though there was a lot of raw stock and pancake that was used on it. Not much came of the film. So this lawyer who produced some films, there was a lot of, stock that was kept there with the uh, these director. There were a lot of products kept with him, but even after using them, nothing came of that film. That film was a flop. All right. And then one day, the boss decided that he must close down the uh, story department. So this lawyer lost his job, and that was the only day in history where a lawyer lost his job because of the poets and the writers that were asked to go home. So now he had no work to do. And hence, since his department was closed, and the department mainly comprised the poets and the writers, and because they were asked to go, he had to lose his job. So that was the only, you can say, incident in human history that, according to Asokamitran, that made a lawyer lose his job because of the poets and um, writers. Now, Gemini Studios was the favorite haunt of poets like S.D.S. Yogyar, Sangu Subramanyam, Krishna Shastri, and Harindranath Chattopadhyay. Okay, so here we have Mr. Yogyar, then Subramanyam, Mr. Shastri, and finally Mr. Chattopadhyay. Okay, hold on. It had an excellent mess which supplied good coffee at all times of the day and for most part of the night. Those were the days when Congress rule meant prohibition. Meeting over a cup of coffee was rather satisfying entertainment. Barring the office boys and a couple of clerks, everybody else at the studio radiated leisure, a prerequisite for poetry. Most of them wore khadi and worshipped Gandhiji, but beyond that, they had not the faintest appreciation for political thought of any kind. Naturally, they were all averse to the term communism. A communist was a godless man. He had no filial or conjugal love. He had no compunction about killing his own parents or his children. He was always out to cause and spread unrest and violence among innocent and ignorant people. Such notions, which prevailed everywhere else in South India at that time, also naturally floated about vaguely among the khadi clad poets of Gemini Studio. Evidence of it was soon forthcoming. Okay. Now, first of all, we get to know that Gemini Studios was a favorite place to work and to, just discuss stuff of poets like these four, Mr. Yogyar, Mr. Subramanyam, Mr. Shastri, and Mr. Chattopadhyay. Now, it also had an excellent mess. It had a kitchen, it had a mess that would supply good coffee at all times. And for most part of the night, also, this mess worked and functioned, and people would get good coffee. Okay, so those were the days when Congress rule meant prohibition. Now, meeting over a cup of coffee was an entertainment to these people. So they would regularly come to Gemini Studios to meet and to talk, leaving the office boys and some clerks. Everybody else at the studios, they radiated leisure. They they were very, you can say, they had time. They would spare a lot of time for gossips and for talking and for just sitting around and discussing, which was a prerequisite for poetry, which was one of the things that you need for creating and for discussing and for reciting poetry. Most of these people, they wore khadi and they worshipped Gandhiji, but that was their limit of political understanding. Okay, they had no clue about what was happening in the politics at that time, and so naturally they were all averse to the term communism. They did not like the term communism and they were very against communism. So they would, they had this notion that a communist was a godless man. Okay, the man, he had no love for his parents. No, the person, a communist person, would was believed to be to have no love for his or her parents or his or her children, and would even kill them without thinking twice, okay, or without feeling any guilt. So these communist people were considered to be people who were out to cause, or who were out to spread unrest and violence among innocent and ignorant people. So these people who believed in communism, they were supposed to be thought of being very against humanity, and they were believed to only love themselves, and they were only believed to create chaos and unrest and violence wherever they went, and whoever they met. Now, such notions, because they prevailed everywhere else in South India, everyone else in South India believed the same thing. Naturally, these ideas also floated vaguely. Okay, in some bits and pieces, these ideas of communist people, they also floated vaguely in these khadi clad poets. Okay, so these poets also discussed things like this, as per their understanding of the topic. And now, such an evidence was soon coming. So, Ashokamitran is giving us a kind of warning that an evidence to this belief is about to come. So, that's what we are going to be reading in the next paragraphs. When Frank Buckman's moral rearmament army, some 200 strong, visited Madras sometime in 1952, they could not have found a warmer host in India than the Gemini Studios. Someone called the group an international circus. They weren't very good on the trapeze, or their acquaintance with animals was only at the dinner table. But they presented two plays in the most professional manner. The Jotham Valley and the Forgotten Factor ran several shows in Madras, and along with the other citizens of the city, the Gemini family of 600 saw the plays over and over again. The message of the plays were usually plain and simple homilies, but the sets and the costumes were first rate. Madras and the Tamil drama community were terribly impressed, and for some years almost all Tamil plays had a scene of sunrise and sunset in the manner of Jotham Valley, with a bare stage, a white background curtain, and a tune played on the flute. Okay, so this person is our Frank Buckman, and Bookman. Okay, so this is a proper noun, so there can be multiple pronunciations of this of his surname. All right, so let's go with Buckman here. Now, Frank Buckman, he had his moral rearmament army, okay, which consisted of 200, around 200 actors, and they visited Madras around 1952, and they were welcomed at the Gemini Studios. Okay, they got the best welcome in the Gemini Studios. Now, some of these people also called this rearmament army as international circus. But Ashokamitran is telling us that it was not a kind of circus, because they weren't very good at trapeze. Okay, so trapeze is actually a kind of, you must have seen in a lot of circuses that um there is this there are these poles. Okay, all right. So there are poles like this, and then there are ropes, kind of elastic ropes that are tied to this bar, and then there is a bar here. So people hold this and they swing from it. Okay, so they go from one trapeze to another trapeze, or maybe other bars in between. Okay, so if there is something like this, and then they have many. All right, so that is a trapeze. Okay, so yeah, let me draw it clearly for you once more. Something like, here they have these are poles, and then they have ropes, and then there is a bar that is attached to these ropes, and people, they swing from these ropes. Okay, so it goes to and fro. It's very tall in height, so it's kind of dangerous, and it's seen in a lot of circus. So he's actually giving a counter to this group being called an international circus. So he was saying that they were not good at on the trapeze, and the only familiarity they had with animals, another part of the circus. Okay, so the only familiarity they had with the animals was when they ate them. So they were not any circus. They were not an international circus, but they presented two plays in a most professional manner, in a very high quality manner. Okay, the first one was Jotham Valley, and the second one was Forgotten Factor. So if a question arises in PGT exams that what were the two plays that Frank Buckman's Moral Rearmament Army presented, first one was this Jotham Jotham Valley, and the second one was Forgotten Factor. So this is important for PGT. All right, and you can barely be asked about the year, but it was 1952. Just remember, it is Frank Buckman's Moral Rearmament Army, and the two plays were Jotham Valley and Forgotten Factor. Okay, and this these plays they ran they ran a lot of shows. They ran several shows in Madras, and people from all over Tamil Nadu, they came to watch these plays over and over again. And even the Gemini family, which was of around 600 people at that time, they saw these plays over and over again. Okay, the message that these plays gave, they were very simple, and they were really more about the religion. You can say it was kind of a religious movement relating to this was basically for spiritual edification, for helping people understand spirituality, and this was more of Christianity here. Okay, so they were simple plays telling us about, telling those people at that time about um, about their religion. Okay, telling people about spirituality. But what attracted the people were actually the sets and the costumes that were first rate, that they hadn't ever seen in their times. So Madras and Tamil drama community, they were very much inspired by them. They were very much impressed by these costumes and the sets that Tamil plays. They actually they borrowed their scenes of sunrise and sunset from the way that sunrise and sunset were portrayed. Those scenes were portrayed in Jotham Valley, in which they had a bare stage. There was nothing on the stage. There was only a white background curtain, and a tune was played on the flute. So that was how the sunrise and sunset were di- uh, uh, displayed in these Jotham Valley, and that was what inspired the Tamil plays. And the Tamil drama community, they took it from there, and they inculcated it in their own plays after they watched. They were very impressed by these two plays, by the sets and the costumes majorly. All right. It was some years later that I learned that the MRA, that is Moral Rearmament Army, was kind of counter movement to international communism. And the big bosses of Madras, like Mr. Watson, simply played into their hands. I'm not sure, however, that this was indeed the case for unchangeable aspects of these big bosses, and their enterprises remain the same: MRA or no MRA, international communism or no international communism. The staff of Gemini Studios had a nice time hosting 200 people of all hues and sizes, of at least 20 nationalities. It was such a change from the usual collection of crowd players, waiting to be slapped with thick layers of makeup by the office boy in the makeup department. Okay, so it was about some years later that Ashokamitran understood, he got to know that this MRA, this Moral Rearmament Army, this was actually a counter movement to the communism, the thought of communism that was going on. Okay, so they were also against communism. And the big bosses, like the big bosses of Madras, like Mr. Vasan, they simply just, accepted their plays, and they simply played into their hands. They did as MRA wanted them to. Okay. However, uh, Ashoka Mitran says that it does. He thinks that it doesn't matter whether they knew that uh, MRA was a counter movement for international communism or not, because the big bosses and the enterprises, they remained the same. Whether there was MRA, whether there was no MRA, they were against communism, and they were still there. Okay, international communism or no international communism, they never changed. Okay, their enterprises remained the same, their work remained the same, these big bosses remained the same. All right. And now, uh, in addition to that, the staff of Gemini Studios, they had a nice time hosting 200 people of that came from at least 20 nationalities. So this MRA was a group of people from 20 different nationalities at least, and there were people of all kinds, of all colors, of all sizes. Okay, now this was a change for the people of Gemini Studios, for the members of the Gemini Studios, for the workers of the Gemini Studios, from the usual collection of crowd players, from that those huge number of people that they saw day in day out, that were, you know, uh, slapped with thick layers of makeup. They were the makeup was put on them, a lot of makeup was put on them, and that was this was a kind of a change. Seeing 200 people in different colors and different sizes was a change for the people of Gemini Studios. A few months later, the telephone lines of the big bosses of Madras buzzed, and once again we at Gemini Studios cleared a whole shooting stage to welcome another visitor. Okay, so first visitor was this moral rearmament army. This was against international communism. Now, after a few months, uh, the people, the you can say the people at the high position, high posts, their telephone lines started ringing again, and they got to know that there was another visitor coming. Okay, and Gemini Studios was again asked to clear a whole shooting stage to welcome this new visitor. All they said that he was a poet from England. Now, the only poets from England that the simple Gemini staff knew or heard were Wordsworth and Tennyson. Okay, so these were the famous poets of that time, William Wordsworth and Alfred Lord Tennyson. Okay, the more literate ones, the simple ones, the ones that were not much educated, they they had only heard of William Wordsworth because they were very famous at that time, and Alfred Lord Tennyson. And then the ones who were more educated, who were more literate, they knew about Keats, they knew of Keats, Shelley, and Byron. And one or two might have faintly come to know of someone by the name Eliot. Okay, who was the poet visiting the Gemini Studios now? Okay, now these were the poets that people of Gemini Studios at that time they knew of. So they knew, most of them knew William Wordsworth, they knew Alfred Lord Tennyson, then some of them knew John Keats, they some and Percy Bysshe Shelley and Lord Byron, and then there were very few that had heard of Thomas Stearns Eliot. Okay, T.S. Eliot. So these were very famous poets of their times in of England, and however, only these two were heard of the most, and then John Keats, Shelley, and Byron, and then finally a few, maybe one or two people knew about Eliot. So they were confused as to which one of these was coming. Okay, which one of these poets was coming to visit India and to visit Tamil Nadu, to visit Madras, and for whom had the Gemini Studios had to clear this shooting stage. He is not a poet; he is an editor. That's why the boss is giving him a big reception. Vasan was also the editor of the popular Tamil weekly Anand Vikatan. Okay, so now there was this confusion whether it's a poet coming or is it an editor coming. Okay, so the news was not actually clear. People were not sure who's actually coming. Was it poet? Was it one of these poets? William Wordsworth, Lord Tennyson, John Keats, P.B. Shelley, Byron, or Eliot? Or was it some other person altogether? So Mr. Vasan who was the editor of popular Tamil weekly Anand Vikatan. This weekly's name is Anand Vikatan. Okay. He clarifies that it's not a poet that's coming, it's actually an editor who's coming. And that is why the boss, the head of the Gemini Studios, is giving him a big reception. All right. He wasn't the editor of any known names of British publication in Madras. That is, those known at the Gemini Studios. Since the top men of the Hindu were taking the initiative, the surmise was that the poet was the editor of a daily, but not from the Manchester Guardian or the London Times. That was all that even the most well informed among us knew. Okay, so now even there is a lot of confusion as to who is coming, who was coming. Okay, so now they get to know more information about him, that he was not an editor of any of the famous British publications that people in Madras knew or read about. But since the Hindu is one of our very elite newspapers, very, you can say, a famous newspaper that is read nationwide. Okay, so since the top men of the Hindu, they were taking, they were kind of, they were supposing that something is true without having any evidence. They were writing, writing articles about this. Okay, they were taking the initiative. They were um, covering this news. So it was kind of spread that the supposed poet, actually he's not a poet, the poet was the editor of a daily. Okay, but it was not any famous newspaper that he edited. Okay, he was the editor of some local newspaper. All right, it was not from the Manchester Guardian or the London Times. He was, and that was all the information that even the best, the well informed, the most well informed people among the Gemini Studios knew of. Alright. At last, around 4 in the afternoon, the poet or the editor, it is still very confusing whether the person who's coming is a poet or an editor. They came, that person, he came around 4 in the afternoon. He was a tall man, very English, very serious, and of course, very unknown to all of us. He was not a known person. Battling with half a dozen pedestal fans on the shooting stage, the boss read out a long speech. It was obvious that he too knew precious little about the poet or the editor. The speech was all in the most general terms, but here and there it was peppered with words like freedom and democracy. Then the poet spoke. He couldn't have addressed a more dazed and silent audience. No one knew what he was talking about, and his accent defeated any attempt to understand what he was saying. So now this person, it is still clear whether it's a poet or the person, he's an editor. Who is that person? What is the identity of that person is still very unclear, even to the boss who was supposed to welcome him. Okay, so we all have that welcome speech when you have a special guest, right? So the boss was giving out this speech, but even he was confused. He had no clue. He knew very little about this personality who had come, and so his speech was very general. It had very general terms, and here and there he had sprinkled words like freedom, like democracy, to make this um, speech look like it was for this visitor. Okay, and to make it more appealing to the visitor. Now then this poet or editor, whoever he was, he came to the stage and he spoke. Now, because he was from England, he had a very English, he had that British accent. So it was already very difficult for people to understand. They did not know him at all. So it was very difficult for the people to understand what he was saying, and his accent, that made the situation worse. So this visitor came in and he confused everyone. Okay, he could not he addressed a very confused and very silent audience. He talked to a very silent audience because the people, they could not understand what he was trying to convey, what he was talking about. And whatever he was saying, his accent made it worse. Okay, so these people, they were left in daze, they were left confused. The whole thing lasted about an hour. Then the poet left, and we all dispersed in utter bafflement. What are we doing? What is an English poet doing in a film studio which makes Tamil films for simplest sort of people? People whose lives least afforded them the possibility of cultivating a taste for English poetry. The poet looked pretty baffled too, for he too must have felt the sheer incongruity of his talks about the thrills and travails of an English poet. His visit remained an unexplained mystery. Now, finally, we get to know that this person who had visited was a poet, not an editor. And after talking for an hour, the poet left. And then everyone who had gathered to listen to him, they they also dispersed. They also left in very confused state as to what they were doing in that studio for an hour. And then they started questioning, what was this English poet doing in a film studio that made Tamil films for the simplest sort of people? So people, they did not even know the language. What was this English poet doing in addressing such a crowd for an hour? These people, they couldn't even afford the possibility of creating a taste for English poetry. What was this person trying to tell them? What was this person trying to explain to them about English poetry? And of course, the feeling was mutual. Even the poet must have questioned to himself as to what he was doing addressing such a crowd that couldn't even understand him. He was also confused because he also felt the sheer incompatibility. How anything that he said was totally that was not understood by anybody present there. And how, I mean, they were not able to relate to whatever he spoke, whatever troubles, whatever effort he put as an English poet. Whatever he talked about an English poet, it was completely, uh, you know, a, an out of context topic for these people. So his visit remained an unexplained mystery. Nobody could understand why he visited, and he couldn't understand, again, he also couldn't understand why he visited and addressed such a crowd that could not understand him at all. The great prose writers of the world may not admit it, but my conviction grows stronger day after day that prose writing is not and cannot be a true pursuit of a genius. It is for the patient, persistent, persevering grudge with a heart so shrunken that nothing can break it. Rejection slips don't mean a thing to him. He at once sets about making a fresh copy of the long prose piece and sends it on to another editor, enclosing postage for the return of the manuscript. It was for such people that the Hindu had published a tiny announcement in an insignificant corner of an unimportant page. A short story contest organized by a British periodical by the name The Encounter. Of course, The Encounter wasn't a known commodity among the Gemini literati. I wanted to get an idea of the periodical before I spent a considerable sum in postage sending a manuscript to England. In those days, the British Council Library had an entrance with no long winded signboards and notices to make you feel you were sneaking into a forbidden area. And there were copies of The Encounter lying about in various degrees of freshness, almost untouched by readers. When I read the editor's name, I heard a bell ringing in my shrunken heart. It was the poet who had visited the Gemini Studios. I felt like I had found a long lost brother. I sang as I sealed the envelope and wrote out his address. I felt that he too would be singing the same song at the same time. Long lost brothers of Indian films discover each other by singing the same song in the first reel and the final reel of the film. Stephen Spender. Stephen. That was his name. Now, uh, Asokamitran is talking about his writing journey. Okay, he says that it is not easy to be a prose writer, to write an essay, to write a story is not easy, and it is not a true pursuit of a genius. Anybody who's a genius would pursue writing poetry. Okay, not a people of this you know people who are considered to be genius, they wouldn't write prose. All right, and the great prose writers of the world also will not admit to it. Okay, but being a prose writer himself, he says that his conviction, his notion about prose writing grows stronger each day. And he says that it is only for the people who are very patient, who are very persistent and persevering, that no matter how many rejections they face, they know that they will again bounce back and they will keep working, they'll keep doing the work. Okay, they have that persevering dodge that they will keep doing that menial hard work. Okay, and nothing can break it. So now, um, he talks about that such people, they would um, once uh, no matter whether they are rejected, they will again start writing. Okay, they don't stop for anything. So it was for such people who kept on writing and long prose pieces, and they kept sending to the editors, and they also would enclose the postage so that they would the editors would return the copy. Okay, so it was for such people with such strong, persistent and patient heart that the Hindu, the newspaper, had published a very tiny announcement in a very insignificant corner of a very unimportant page. Okay, there was this British periodical that came in, that was issued periodically, that hence the name British periodical, by the name The Encounter. Okay, this uh, kind of newspaper, this came, uh, this was published and by the name The Encounter, and it was not known to even the literates of the Gemini studios. Okay, so Ashokamitran wanted to get an idea of what this periodical was, so that he could, if it appealed to him, he could send his work in there and see what happens after that. Okay, so he had to, because he had to post it, so he had to also spend a considerable sum in postage, because they had to send it to the send the manuscript to England. Okay, now in those days the British Council Library had an entrance with no long winded signboards or notices to make you feel like you were sneak. So in those times, in those days of Ashokamitran, now this British Council Library, it had a free entrance and no signboards were there, no notices were there that would make one feel that they were entering a prohibited area. Okay, so there he went to the library, and there he looked for copies of The Encounter, which he found very easily lying around in various degrees of freshness. So he saw that most of the people did not even read this periodical, The Encounter. But when he read the editor's name, he realized, he finally realized who was editing this, The Encounter. He recognized the person, and he realized that it was the poet who had visited the Gemini Studios. So this poet, this that we come to know as Stephen Spender, is a poet as well as an editor. So there was a lot of confusion whether the person is a poet, whether the person is an editor. He is both. Okay, so he was a poet and he was an English poet, as well as he was the editor of the Encounter. Okay, and now when he read and when he realized it was the same person, he kind of felt like um, Stephen Spender would understand his plight, Ashokamitran's plight, and probably would recognize him as well. And they both, because his prose is also not being read, and Ashokamitran's prose was also not being read. Okay, and that was what he was feeling, because he was also getting rejection over and over again. So he felt that Stephen Spender would understand his plight, he would understand his sorrow, his troubles, and they would be singing the same song. That means they would be on the same page, they would be thinking the same thing in the first reel and the final reel of the film. All right, so he decided to send his manuscript to Stephen Spender. Yes, Stephen Spender was his name. Finally we discover that. And years later, when I was out of Gemini Studios and I had much time but not much money, anything at a reduced price attracted my attention. On the footpath in the front of the Madras Mount Road post office, there was a pile of brand new books for 50 paise each. Actually, there were copies of the same book, an elegant paperback of American origin, special low priced student edition, in connection with the 50th anniversary of the Russian Revolution. I paid 50 paise and picked up a copy of the book, The God That Had Failed. 6 eminent men of letters in 6 separate essays described their journeys into communism and their disillusioned return. Andre Guides, hopefully, Richard Wright, Ignacio Sillon, Arthur Koester, Louis Fisher, and Stephen Spender. These 6 people had written essays about communism and their disillusion. They had written about how they had this illusion about communism, and how what their journey was, and then how all this part of being part of being a communist, how that journey had made them disillusioned and had forced them to return. Okay, so there were these 6, and one of them was Stephen Spender. Stephen Spender. Suddenly, the book assumed tremendous significance. Stephen Spender, the poet who had visited Gemini Studios. In a moment, I felt a dark chamber of my mind lit up by a hazy illumination. The reaction to Stephen Spender at Gemini Studios was no longer a mystery. The boss of the Gemini Studios may not have much to do with Spender's poetry, but not with his God that failed. Okay, so years later, when he had quit Gemini Studios and he had a lot of time, but he did not have enough money, he was attracted to read anything that was cheap. Okay, so on the footpath in front of Madras Mount Road post office, there was a pile of brand new books for 50 paise each. Actually, they were copies of the same book, an elegant paperback of American origin, which was now made to be of a low priced edition, student edition, so that people could read about the Russian Revolution. Okay, and about communism. So this book was about communism, and there were 6 men, eminent men of letters. That means there were 6 people who were, known for their writings, who were very educated. Okay, and this book was titled The God That Failed. All right, now In this, there were six separate essays that described six different journeys of people into communism, and then how they were disappointed by that communism, and then they returned to their own religion and to their own from where they started. Okay, so there were six people: Andre Gide, Richard Wright, Ignacio Silon, Arthur Kohlstor, Louis Fisher, and Stephen Spender. Now, as Asokamitran read the name Stephen Spender, suddenly this book became more uh, significant to him. It gained more significance because it was about, because there was work of Stephen Spender. There was a prose from Stephen Spender, the poet who had visited Gemini Studios. So it automatically um, became more important to him. Okay. In a moment, I felt a dark chamber of my mind lit up by hazy illumination. So when he read that Stephen Spender has also had also contributed his work, his prose into this to this book, he felt happy. He felt like a dark chamber in his mind had been lit by some hazy illumination. The reaction to Stephen Spender at Gemini Studios was no longer a mystery. Okay, it was not a mystery to him anymore that why people couldn't understand Stephen Spender. Okay, the boss of the Gemini Studios may not have had much to do with Stephen's poetry, but not with his god that failed. So Ashokamitran is basically trying to tell us that even though the boss of the Gemini Studios was not concerned about Spender's poetry, but he would be very much concerned about Stephen Spender's experience as a communist and by of his of the communist ideology and how they rejected. Okay, so that is where Ashokamitran ends his story, his chapter. Now that we have discussed the chapter in detail, let us quickly discuss the significance of this title, as the question arises in a lot of exams. So let's discuss that. First is the literal meaning. First, pancake refers to the max factor pancake makeup that was used in Gemini Studios to prepare actors for shooting. Okay, and poets refer to the self styled intellectuals and creative personalities at the studio, as well as to English poet Stephen Spender. So, in this chapter, we see mention of two major things. First is pancake. You can say this chapter is actually divided into two parts. First one is pancake, and the second one is poets. Okay, so we talk about poets like how this makeup boy is also a poet. Okay, and we have they discuss about the poets that they know and so on and so forth. And then of course the major poet that has been discussed here is Stephen Spender. Okay, and the first part of this chapter discusses in great detail about pancake, how this makeup brand was used for many years, and then after some after these years, when the time came around after mid 20th century, how this brand kind of vanished, that people after mid 20th century did not even hear about this brand. However, before that, before mid 20th century, people, every person in this Gemini Studios was using this makeup brand of by the name Pancake to slather makeup on the actors and actresses and even the crowd actors and comedians and everyone. Okay, so we see this, and we see how these two have been used. Okay, so the first significance of the title is that its literal meaning, that is the brand Pancake, and the poets that includes majorly English poet Stephen Spender. We also discuss about different creative personalities, different Indian poets also, like we had Subramanyam and I think there were so many here, right? We discussed Where were the Indian poets? Yes, this one. Yeah. So we discussed about Yogyar, Subramanyam, Shastri, and Chattopadhyay. Okay, so how Gemini Studios was the favorite place for gathering of these poets, and how they used to sit uh, uh, with a cup of coffee and they used to discuss their ideas and so on and so forth. So these were there. Okay. So that's what the literal meaning of this um, title is, the significance. Then second, we have the symbolic meaning. So pancake actually refers to superficial glamour. Okay, because um, you see that the actors, even the ones that were decent looking, that were good looking naturally, they were slathered with makeup. They were so coated with makeup that they started looking ugly instead of looking beautiful. So this pancake also refers to the superficial glamour of the film industry, that how people use layers and layers to cover their actual self up. All right, this represents the artificiality of the film industry, right? The artificiality of the film industry, where appearances are created. Okay, they're not natural, they're created, and reality is hidden under layers of makeup, right? Just as I explained. Poets, this shows intellectual pretense. Okay, how people pretend to be someone they're not. Okay, they show that they're so intellectual, but they're not really aware, because you see this, we see two incidents. First one is about the communism, that people discuss communism, the ideas of communism in Gemini Studios, but they're not actually aware of what communism is. Okay, so they go by whatever they have heard. And second thing, that people were not aware of who was actually coming to visit them, who was actually coming to talk to them. And then when that person does come, when we talk about Stephen Spender, when he does come, they don't really understand. So they're not that shows that there is not much literary depth or political awareness. Okay, uh, so this, you can say, this represents people who claim literary depth. Okay, please don't change. Okay, yeah. We were here. Okay, yeah. So this poets also symbolizes that people who claim literary depth, symbolizes people who claim literary depth or political awareness without any genuine understanding. Okay, without any uh, clear understanding of what they're talking about or what they are. They just hear something and then they just repeat it. So they claim themselves to be literate, and they claim themselves to be literatis, like when the term that this Asokamitran has used, that Gemini literatis. Okay, so they considered themselves as literates and as higher, or people claim to have literary depth, but they did not. And similarly, it goes with political awareness. Okay, like as I told you about communism, they would discuss communism without actually having an understanding of what really communism was. Okay, so that's its symbolical meaning. Now, why has Ashokamitran put both words together? The two words are comically mismatched. Okay, just like the world Ashokamitran is describing, where serious poetry and shallow glamour oddly coexist. Okay, so now he's talking about how poetry, which is something very deep and very um, you can say very meaningful, whereas glamour, which is very superficial, how they both are put together. Okay, how they both coexist. This Gemini Studio is a, you can say, is a small um, representation of the entire world. How where there are people who are aware of a lot of things and who have that depth in them, who have knowledge, who have understanding, whereas people who and then there are also people who are just superficial, who are there for just showing off. Okay, so there is this contrast, there is this irony between the two, and how they still coexist, how they still live in the same world. Okay, so that's why pancake poets and pancakes has been put together. The world of cinema, that is surface beauty and makeup show, and the world of literature, that is depth, ideas, and culture. Okay, so poets represent the world of literature and pancake represents the world of cinema. So pancake refers to something of low significance, of low depth, something that is shallow, something that does not have any deep meaning. Okay, and then poets, they um, symbolize that part of the world which has a lot of understanding, which has a lot of knowledge, which has a lot of depth in them. All right. Finally, the overall significance. The title sums up two main strands of the essay: behind the scenes reality of the film world, which is Pancake, and author's an encounter with literary figures and pretentious intellectual talks. Okay, it is short, catchy, ironic, exactly matching the essay's humorous tone. So this title, it finally sums up the two main strands, the two main parts of this essay. Okay, it's a part of the biography. It's a part of Asokamitran's biography, and it's kind of written in. It's written in a form of an essay with humor, underlying humor tone, and it's short. It's catchy. It's ironic. It shows irony in a lot of different incidents. Okay, and this title finally sums up the two main aspects of this essay. The first one is the uh, superficiality of cinema, okay, behind the scenes of the film world, of the theater, of the cinema, how people are made up, how people are slathered with makeup to appear to be someone they are not, okay, and how they act to be someone they are not. So that shows the world of the film world, okay, the behind the scenes, what goes on, how people are changed, how people's appearances are changed to show something else. Okay, and then the second part is about the poets. So which symbolizes the literary part of the world, which symbolizes how uh, Ashoka Mitran meets different literary figures and how he finds that a lot of them are pretentious and a lot of them do not even have that depth and understanding that an intellectual should have. Okay, and then how they discuss intellectuality and how they discuss a lot of things trying to show off their intellect. Okay, so that is why the two words have been used, poets and pancakes. I hope the significance of the title is clear. In case this question comes for around 3 to 5 marks, you can see how to write. This is just a beginning. Okay, you can add your own examples and your own points in this. So you can just pause the video here or maybe take a screenshot. And if you want question answers like this in PDF form, make sure to comment in the comment box and I will create a PDF for you and then give you a link so you can download that PDF for free. All right, so you can just take this screenshot or you can note it down, you can pause the video, read it, and then you can write your own answer. Now we move to the next part, which is we take a quick recap and then we'll move to the literary aspect of this chapter. So first we see that the story is humorous. It's a memoir style account set in the famous Gemini Studios, which was in Madras, which is now Chennai. The author, Asokamitran, he recalls his time working in the makeup department. He was in the story department. Okay, and he works in that story department, and then he talks about the makeup artists and all sorts of people that were there. Okay, then he describes the daily life or at the studio, making the makeup process using the brand Pancake and quirky personalities that work there. Then he talks about the arrival of an Englishman, which is later revealed as poet Stephen Spender, and the studios confuses this at the studio who confuses the staff because they don't even understand the purpose of his visit. Finally, the narrator connects the dots while reading The God That Failed, a book edited by Stephen Spender, a book in which there was an essay by Stephen Spender, okay, and five others. They talked about how their journey through communism, and how they followed the ideology of communism, and how that backfired, and they did not like the ideology, and they returned to their previous ideologies. All right, so that was a quick recap. Let us now discuss the literary aspect part of this chapter of this video. First, we begin with colonial hangover. Okay, so if we talk about and literary elitism, so if we talk about colonial hangover, we can see that this chapter is set around 1950s. Okay, so that is very fresh from 1947, and of course we all know what happened on in 1947. We got our freedom, right? So this is just 3 years later, so it is around that time when we got fresh independence, and we were India was struggling post independence, and there was a lot of colonial hangover, and there was still British influence on people. Okay, and then we talk about literary elitism. So uh, here we see how there are people who are literate, and who consider themselves as elite, who consider themselves as of superior. They consider themselves superior, they consider themselves higher than other people. So we talk about this literary elitism, and then we see colonial hangover also, because we see how Ashokamitran also wants his work to be published by an English periodical that was edited by Stephen Spender. Okay, so we see that. Then fine, we see the absurdity of glamour versus reality. Okay, so we see how glamour makes something that is very real into something that is not. Okay, so we see how uh, we see behind the scenes, and we see how makeup is has been used to make to create appearances, to make people look as like they're not actually. Okay, so um you know trying to make them look better, but instead it takes away their originality, their reality. And then, so that is there, that's the absurdity of glamour, how glamour makes something that is so real, and that is so um, actually in its natural state, it is very it is much better. So how due to glamour, that thing turned into something that is ugly. We also see this one example of this girl, a very talented actor from the village, who, because she was put into so much pressure, okay, to act in a certain way, to behave in a certain way, that she got temperamental. She had an outburst, and then her career was ended. So she turned out into this ugly person. She actually got made into this ugly person because she could not bear the pressure of glamour. Okay, so there is this absurdity of glamour versus reality. Okay, how glamour and reality don't really go hand in hand. Okay, then the next theme is the creative frustrations of writers and artists, which has been seen, where Ashoka Mitran in detail tells about how he was really frustrated, and how prose writing is only for people who are made of hard material, strong heart, because they keep getting rejections. Okay, and then we also see how it has been mentioned that Stephen Spender also discusses what problems English poets face. Okay, so there is this creative frustration that Ashoka Mitran has talked about. Next, we have miscommunication across cultures and ideologies. First is how communism has been discussed here, where people do not really know what communism is, but they still discuss that ideology, and they don't really understand what they're talking about. And then cultures, um, you see how we talk about moral rearmament army, we talk about how Stephen Spender has come, and he talks about his culture as a poet, and how his culture has influenced his journey as a poet. And yet, and even the literate people, the people who consider themselves as literary elites, they do not understand what he's trying to convey, okay, in his speech. So that is the miscommunication across cultures. Then we have politics in art and literature. Okay, we see how literature and art was also influenced by politics. All right. Oh, sorry. And then finally, we have identity and anonymity in creative industries, that people have they they create certain identities. They have an identity of their own. Like Subbu had two different identities. Okay, and then there is anonymity in creative industries, that there are some people who are not even known. They work like again, an example of Stephen Spender, that they work hard, they put their efforts, and yet they do not get recognized. So there is this anonymity there in creative industries. So people are also fighting for identity in creative industries. So these were the themes that have been discussed in this chapter. Now let's move to the tone, mood, and style. The tone, first of all, is witty, satirical, observational, and nostalgic. So he's talking about things that happened in his past, and he's trying to be witty. He uses satire in a lot of situations, and he's been observational. He's observed how cinemas work and how poets work. Okay. Then mood is light-hearted and humorous, with an undercurrent of reflection and irony. So we see that the mood is lighthearted. He's used humor, he's used irony, and he also uses reflection. He shows how through humor and through this lightheartedness of the chapter, he shows how people should reflect in themselves. Okay, and how he reflects his past. Then finally, the style is autobiographical and it is written in a conversational tone. So it feels like Ashoka Mitran is talking to us, rich in irony, anecdotes, and subtle humor. Okay, we saw a lot of incidents throughout the chapter, and that shows that those are the anecdotes of his journey. Then it also blends personal memories with commentary on society and art. So he uses incidents that he has experienced in his personal life, and then he comments on them to show what it meant to him, and how he observed society, and how what society should have done, or what society should have been, and what they did. So he added his personal comments on his memories. Okay, so he shared his memories, as well as he put some commentary on society and art. So that is the style of writing. Oh, we've already done literary. Oh, sorry. Okay, let's discuss literary devices. First is irony. Okay, the office boy who considers himself as a poet, he does menial jobs. Okay, then satire on film industry, glamour, and ideological confusion, both poets and pancakes. All right, again, this example of communism can come in here, and example of people makeup being slathered on people to make them look something better, but instead them turning to be something more ugly. That is this satire that has been used here. Anecdotes, all is the incidents that have been put in this chapter. They come under anecdotes, that are short, amusing incidents from studio life. Allusion, then it refers to Stephen Spender's and the god of and sorry, his book, The God That Failed. Okay, so there is allusion here. Allusion is when you refer to something without actually taking its name. Okay, so but then here Ashoka Mitran has finally referred, we finally get to know that the person was Stephen Spender, and he has also discussed about the book The God That Failed. Okay, then understatement, narrator's deadpan style creates comic effect. Okay, so he has put in some comments there which are understatement to the actual situation. Okay, which are kind of you can say not there. So there is this style that he has used, which has been used to create comic effect. Like uh, he wanted to appreciate it, but he's not appreciated it to that level, or he's not used a proper comment, and he's just understated something. Okay, so that is understatement. Finally, main characters. The narrator, of course, Ashoka Mitran. Then we have the office boy, the makeup chief, English visitor, and the boss. Okay, so these are the main characters. You can read their characteristics, and these characteristics can help you write the character sketches, or even answers that ask about the main characters can be written with the help of these descriptions. Next, and finally, we come to the end of this chapter. Of course, this video. So, we discuss the message, the moral that we get from this chapter. First, not everything in the world of film literature or ideology is as serious as or as glamorous as it seems. Okay, so what we see on the screen, what we see in front of us is not supposed, it's not really as it is behind the scenes. Okay, so we see something that has been made up, something that has gone through a lot of filters. Okay, so that is one message that we get from this chapter, that not everything that we see is exactly what it is. It may have gone through a lot of filters to become what it is at that present moment. Okay, and also it's not everything is serious. You can use something, use some or put some things in a humorous way. You can see a lot of situations in a humorous manner. Okay. And next, sometimes ordinary experiences shape profound understandings of identity, creativity, and freedom of thought. Okay, so sometimes even the ordinary experiences that we get from day to day life, they can help us understand about identity, about creativity, and that gives us a freedom of thought. Okay, so these are the two important messages that we get from this chapter. And that's a little tour of Gemini Studios, where poets wore pancake, politicians spoke in riddles, and art met its everyday reality. Asokamitran didn't give us a grand climax, just glimpses of life as it was, with all its quirks and quiet observation. For more English journeys that mix insight with a smile, join our WhatsApp channels. From Class 12 boards to PGT prep, we've got you covered, minus the pancake. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and use the comment box to share with us what you liked about the video and what you didn't, and what you would like to for us to improve. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and share it with everyone who you know can benefit from our videos. Stay tuned for the next video, which will again be a great literary journey. Links of all the channels will be in the description. And remember, in literature, as in life, sometimes the best stories hide in sidelines.